Imagine this. You're miles from civilization. The only sounds are the crackling of your campfire and the gentle whisper of the wind through the trees. You feel a profound sense of peace. Then, a twig snaps nearby. Too loud for a squirrel. Too deliberate for a deer. Your head whips around. Nothing. Just shadows dancing beyond the firelight. But suddenly, the forest doesn't feel empty anymore. That peace? It's gone, replaced by a primal alertness. You tell yourself it's your imagination. But what if it's not? Welcome back to the channel, my friends. And as you might have guessed, tonight we are treading softly into the domain of camping trips gone terribly, terrifyingly wrong. There's something incredibly potent about horror stories set in the wilderness. The isolation, the darkness, the thin canvas of a tent being the only barrier between you and whatever might be out there. The story I have for you tonight has been shared by a viewer, people who sought escape and found something far more unsettling. These are accounts that rely not on jump scares, but on that slow, creeping dread, the dawning realization that you are exposed, vulnerable, and possibly not alone. So, stoke the embers of your courage, pull your blanket a little tighter, and listen closely. Before we dive in, if you appreciate these journeys into true, unsettling experiences, please consider giving this video a like, subscribing for more, and hitting that notification bell so you don't miss what's lurking in our future uploads. And if you have your own true camping horror story, I'll tell you how you can share it at the end. Now, let the fire die down a little. Our story comes from a viewer named Mark, who went on a solo hiking trip seeking solitude, but found something entirely different in the deep woods of the Pacific Northwest. He calls this one The Watcher Beyond the Creek. Mark was an experienced hiker and camper. He'd spent years exploring trails, comfortable with his own company and the rhythms of the wilderness. This particular trip was a 3-day solo trek into a relatively remote section of the Cascade Mountains. He was looking forward to the silence, the challenge, and the unparalleled beauty of the old-growth forest. The first day was idyllic. The trail was clear, the weather was perfect, and he made good time. By late afternoon, he found what he considered the perfect campsite, a small, flat clearing nestled in a grove of ancient fir trees about 50 yards from a clear, fast-flowing creek. It felt secluded, peaceful. He set up his small one-man tent, built a modest campfire, and prepared his dinner as the sun began to dip below the towering peaks, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. As twilight deepened into true night, the forest came alive with its usual nocturnal symphony. The chirping of crickets, the distant hoot of an owl, the gentle murmur of the creek. Mark sat by his fire, enjoying the solitude, feeling a million miles away from the stress of city life. He read for a while, then, feeling pleasantly tired, doused his fire thoroughly and retired to his tent around 10 p.m. He fell asleep easily, but sometime, deep in the night, he was jolted awake. He wasn't sure what had woken him. He lay perfectly still in his sleeping bag, listening intently. The crickets had stopped. The forest was unnervingly silent, save for the constant rush of the creek. Then he heard it, a distinct snap of a twig breaking, coming from the direction of the creek. Mark's senses went on high alert. He knew the sounds of the forest. This wasn't an animal carelessly moving. It sounded too deliberate, too heavy. He held his breath, straining his ears. Minutes passed, filled only with the creek song and the frantic thumping of his own heart. He told himself it was probably just a deer, or perhaps a bear, though he'd seen no signs of bear activity in the area and had stored his food correctly. Eventually, convincing himself it was nothing, he drifted back into an uneasy sleep. The next morning, he found no unusual tracks around his campsite. He decided to explore the area by the creek where he'd heard the sound. About 20 yards from the bank, partially hidden behind a large fern, he found a single, muddy footprint. It was large, much larger than his own boot print, and definitely not from any animal he recognized. It looked humanoid, but misshapen, the toes too long, the heel too broad. A shiver went down his spine. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe an old print from another hiker wearing strange footwear, distorted by rain. But it hadn't rained in days. He spent the second day hiking further up the trail, but the image of that footprint and the unsettling silence of the previous night stayed with him. He found himself constantly glancing over his shoulder, the sense of peaceful solitude replaced by a vague, gnawing unease. He decided to camp in a more open area that night, further from dense tree cover, hoping to feel less hemmed in. As night fell on his second campsite, he built a larger fire than usual. The forest seemed darker, the shadows deeper. He found himself unable to relax, his ears straining for any unusual sound. Around midnight, as he was about to try and get some sleep, he heard it again. This time, it wasn't a twig snap. It was a low, guttural sound, almost a cough or a grunt, coming from the edge of the woods, maybe 70 yards away. It wasn't an animal sound he could identify. It was followed by a heavy rustling in the undergrowth, as if something large was moving stealthily, deliberately. Mark grabbed his heavy flashlight and his pepper spray, his heart pounding. "Who's out there?" He called out, his voice sounding weaker than he intended. "Hello?" Silence. The rustling stopped. He scanned the tree line with his flashlight beam, but saw nothing but dark trunks and dense foliage. He stayed up for another hour, adrenaline coursing through him, but the sounds didn't return. Sleep was impossible. He sat with his back against a log, flashlight in hand, until the first gray light of dawn began to filter through the trees. He decided then and there to cut his trip short. The joy was gone, replaced by a primal fear he couldn't shake. He packed up his camp hastily, not even bothering with breakfast, and began the long hike back towards the trailhead and his car. The entire hike out, he felt watched. He didn't hear any more distinct sounds, saw no more strange footprints, but the feeling of unseen eyes following him was palpable, oppressive. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every rustle of leaves sounded like pursuit. He pushed himself hard, barely stopping for water, driven by an urgent need to get back to civilization. It was late afternoon when he finally stumbled out of the woods, exhausted, paranoid, but immensely relieved to see his car. As he was unlocking it, he took one last look back at the dark, silent tree line, and that's when he saw it. For just a fleeting moment, standing partially concealed behind a thick fir tree about 100 yards back into the forest, he saw a shape. It was tall, much taller than a man, and broad. It was too far away to make out details, but it was dark, and it blended almost perfectly with the shadows of the trees. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there, watching him. Mark didn't wait. He threw his pack in the car, jumped in, and drove away as fast as he dared on the rough Forest Service road. He didn't look back. He never went solo camping in that region again. He could never prove what he saw or what made those sounds and that footprint. But he knows, with a certainty that still chills him to the bone, that something was out there in those woods with him. Something ancient, something unknown, and something that was definitely watching. The Watcher Beyond the Creek, as he called it, remains a deeply unsettling memory of a time when the wilderness felt not just wild, but actively, intelligently, hostile. The fear of being watched, especially in such an isolated environment, is incredibly potent. Mark's experience highlights how quickly that sense of peace in nature can be shattered by the unexplained. That final glimpse. It's the stuff of nightmares. Have you ever had a camping experience that you couldn't quite explain, or that left you feeling truly afraid? I'd love to read your thoughts and your own stories in the comments below. If you found the story compelling and want to support the channel, please hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and tap the notification bell so you're always alerted to our latest ventures into the unsettling. Until next time, be safe in your adventures, respect the wilderness, and perhaps keep a little extra watch on the shadows just beyond your firelight. Good night.